Listen to the universe. It's shouting at you. See now what it's trying to tell you. The moment the universe gets loud, there is a version of your life that was running smoothly. Maybe not perfectly, but smoothly enough. You had your routines, your plans, your quiet understandings with the world about how things were supposed to go. And then something shifted. Maybe it happened all at once. A sudden ending, an unexpected loss, a moment so abrupt and disorienting that you could not find solid ground beneath you. Or maybe it happened slowly, the way water erodes stone. A gradual accumulation of signs, frictions, and disappointments that you kept explaining away until the weight of them became impossible to carry. Either way, you arrived here, at this edge, at this moment where the life you are living no longer feels like the life you are meant to live, and the life you are meant to live has not yet made itself clear. This is not failure. This is not punishment. This is not proof that you are lost, that you chose wrong, that the universe has forgotten you or turned its back on you. This is something else entirely. This is contact. The universe does not stop communicating. Not when you are asleep, not when you are distracted, not when you are too busy or too frightened or too proud to listen. It speaks continuously, through the texture of your daily experience, through the feelings that rise in your chest without invitation, through the events that seem to arrive from nowhere and rearrange everything. It speaks in a language that is older than words and more precise than logic. And when that language goes unheard, it does not give up. It gets louder. What you are experiencing right now, the disruption, the disorientation, the sense that something larger than your personal will is at work, is not the universe abandoning you. It is the universe reaching for you, with urgency, with intention, with the kind of love that does not soften its message just because the message is difficult to receive. This video is not going to tell you what to do. It is not going to give you a plan or a process or a list of steps that will make everything fall back into place. What it is going to do is something more important. It is going to teach you how to listen, how to hear what your life has been trying to tell you, how to read the signs that have been placed along your path with a precision and a care that you may only now be beginning to understand. By the end of this, you will not be the same person who pressed play. Not because anything outside of you will have changed, but because the lens through which you see everything, every loss, every ending, every moment of chaos, will have shifted. And when the lens shifts, the entire world shifts with it. Stay here. What follows was written for you, not for a general audience, not for the idea of someone going through something difficult, but for you specifically, in this exact moment of your life. The fact that you found this video is itself a message. You will understand what I mean before we are done, the language beneath all languages. Before the universe speaks in numbers, before it speaks through coincidences, before it arranges a stranger in your path who says the exact words you needed to hear, it speaks in something quieter, something that exists beneath the level of thought, beneath language, beneath the constant running commentary of the conscious mind. It speaks in frequency, in sensation, in the wordless, immediate, unargued knowing that lives in the body before the brain has time to interpret it. You have felt this. You have felt it more times than you can count. It was the pull you could not explain, the inexplicable draw toward something, or the equally inexplicable repulsion from something else. It was the unease that settled in your chest in a relationship that looked perfectly fine from the outside. It was the certainty that arrived in a quiet moment, before the evidence, before the logic, before anything you could point to and say, "Here, this is why I know." You just knew. And then perhaps you talked yourself out of it. You told yourself it was irrational, oversensitive, fear masquerading as intuition, and you moved forward anyway, into the very situation that the feeling had been warning you about. This is not a story of failure. This is the most universal story there is. Every human being alive has had this experience. The wisdom that arrives before the mind is ready. The inner knowing that gets overruled by external pressure, by the desire for things to be different, by the deep human need to believe that what we cannot control will somehow work out on our own terms. But the frequency does not lie. It has never lied to you. And learning to recognize it, to distinguish it from fear, from wishful thinking, from the noise of old wounds, is the beginning of everything. Carl Jung spent decades studying what he called synchronicity, the meaningful coincidence of inner states and outer events that share no causal relationship but carry an unmistakable resonance. The thought of a person seconds before they call, the book that falls open to the exact passage you needed, the dream that mirrors with uncanny precision something that has not yet happened in waking life. Jung did not consider these experiences to be supernatural. He considered them to be evidence of a deeper order, an intelligence that connects the inner world and the outer world, the personal and the universal, the visible and the invisible. This intelligence is not separate from you. It is not something that exists out there in the cosmos, occasionally sending signals down to the human plane. It is the very fabric of your existence. It speaks through your body because your body is its instrument. It speaks through your emotions because your emotions are its language. It speaks through the patterns of your life because your life is its message. The ancient Hermetic principle of correspondence, preserved for millennia in the esoteric traditions of Egypt, carried forward through the philosophical schools of the ancient world, and encoded in the foundational texts of Western mysticism, states it with absolute clarity: as above, so below; as within, so without. The world around you is not separate from the world within you. It is a reflection of it, a continuous, dynamic, living mirror that shows you at every moment exactly what is alive inside you, what is healed, what is unresolved, what is calling for your attention. This is not metaphor. This is mechanics. The frequency through which you move through the world determines the experiences that meet you there, not because the universe is rewarding or punishing you, but because the universe is always responding, always echoing back what you are broadcasting, with a fidelity so precise that once you begin to see it, you cannot unsee it. The language beneath all languages is the language of resonance. And your life, from the very beginning, has been a conversation conducted in that language. Every choice that felt right even when it made no logical sense, every moment of sudden clarity in the middle of chaos, every relationship that ended and left behind, beneath the grief, a strange and guilty sense of relief. Every door that closed and forced you eventually down a path you would never have chosen for yourself, and that turned out to be the one that changed everything. The universe has been speaking to you in this language your entire life. The only question that has ever mattered is whether you are willing to learn how to hear it. You already felt it coming. There is something most people never say out loud, something they carry quietly, privately, often with a significant weight of shame attached to it. And it is this: they knew. Before the relationship ended, they knew it would. Before the job fell apart, they felt something was wrong. Before the crisis arrived, there was a period, sometimes days, sometimes months, sometimes years, during which something inside them was sending a consistent, clear, unwavering message that was being consistently, clearly, and unwaveringly ignored. You knew. Some part of you always knows. This is not a comfortable truth. Because if you knew, then the next question the mind moves to is, why didn't you act on it? Why didn't you leave sooner, change sooner, listen sooner? And that question, if you let it, becomes a source of enormous self-criticism, a way of using the past against yourself. But that is not why we are here. We are not here to audit your history. We are here to understand it. And understanding it means recognizing something profound. The inner knowing that preceded every difficulty in your life was not a personal failing you ignored. It was the universe, already speaking, already trying to reach you, already planting the awareness that something needed to shift, long before the shift became unavoidable. Think back to the last time something significant ended in your life. A relationship, a chapter, a version of yourself that you have since left behind. Now go further back before the ending, before the crisis point. Somewhere in the weeks or months preceding it, can you find the moment when you felt it? Not the dramatic moment of collapse, but the quieter moment, the earlier one. The morning you woke up and lay still for too long, unable to name the heaviness in your chest. The conversation that left you feeling hollow in a way you couldn't articulate. The night you stared at the ceiling and let yourself just for a moment ask the question you usually kept buried. Is this really what my life is supposed to look like? That was the universe, speaking at a whisper. That was the first message in a sequence. And the fact that you didn't act on it, that you closed the feeling down, redirected your attention, convinced yourself that what you were sensing was anxiety or ingratitude or fear, does not mean you failed to receive it. It means you are not yet ready. And the universe, with infinite patience and absolute persistence, simply continued. There is no shame in not being ready. Readiness is not a moral virtue. It is a process. The soul moves toward truth at exactly the pace it is capable of moving. No faster, no slower. And the signs that you dismissed in one season of your life are often the very signs that make complete and shattering sense in the next. This is what the spiritual tradition means when it speaks of divine timing. Not that the universe operates on a schedule that ignores your needs, but that there is a precise and purposeful unfolding at work in every life, a sequence of experiences, each one preparing the ground for the next, each one delivering exactly what the soul needs at the exact moment it becomes capable of receiving it. You felt what was coming. You were not wrong, and you were not weak. You were a human soul, moving at the speed of your own becoming. And everything that happened, including the parts you wish had gone differently, was part of a conversation that was always, at its deepest level, moving you forward. The question now is not what you failed to hear. The question is what you are hearing now, in this moment, and whether you are willing to let that be enough to change the direction of what comes next. When the whisper becomes a roar. The universe does not raise its voice without reason, and it does not raise it all at once. There is a progression, a sequence that moves from subtlety to urgency in direct proportion to how much the message has been unacknowledged. And once you understand this sequence, you will never look at a crisis in the same way again. It begins, almost always, with feeling, a quiet discomfort, a vague dissatisfaction, a low-level restlessness that you cannot quite locate or explain. Most people dismiss this stage almost immediately because the feeling is not attached to anything concrete enough to act on. It is just there, like background noise, present, persistent, easy to tune out. When the feeling goes unaddressed, the universe moves to the next stage, circumstance. Small external events begin to mirror the internal state. A conversation that does not go as expected, a plan that falls through, a relationship that develops an inexplicable friction, an opportunity that seems promising but refuses to materialize no matter how much effort you invest. These circumstances are not random. They are reflections. They are the outer world beginning to show you, in increasingly tangible form, what the inner feeling was already communicating. If the circumstances are explained away, if they are attributed to bad luck, to the failures of others, to the wrong timing, the universe moves to the third stage. Pattern. The same experience begins to repeat itself. Different people, different settings, different surface details, but the same emotional core, the same feeling of being unheard, or unseen, or trapped, or abandoned. The same type of person who keeps entering your life and leaving in the same way. The same door that keeps closing no matter how many times you approach it. The same wall that keeps appearing at the end of the same corridor. Patterns are the universe's most patient language. They will repeat for as long as they need to, months, years, entire decades, because a pattern is not a punishment. It is a question. It is the universe asking, with increasing insistence, do you see this? Do you understand what is being shown to you here? Are you ready yet to look at what this keeps reflecting? And if the pattern too goes unread, if it is met with frustration and resignation rather than curiosity and courage, the universe moves to the final stage, the one that leaves no room for misinterpretation, the one that forces the stillness that nothing else could create. The crisis, the collapse, the moment when the structure of a life, or a relationship, or an identity, or a belief system, can no longer hold its own weight and comes down. This is the roar. And the roar, as terrifying and disorienting and devastating as it is still the same love that was present in the very first whisper. It has only grown louder because the message has grown more urgent, because the soul has traveled further from its true direction, and the distance needs to be corrected. Because what was being gently suggested at the first stage has now become absolutely necessary. And the universe, in its relentless commitment to your becoming, will not allow the necessary to remain optional indefinitely. If your life is roaring right now, this is what that roar means. Something in you is ready to change. Not just adjust, not just cope, not just adapt, transform. At a level that quieter moments could not have reached, and the very intensity of the current disruption is a precise measure of the depth of the transformation that is waiting on the other side of it. The roar is not the end, it is the threshold, and you are already standing at it. The mirror you have been avoiding. There is a truth that is difficult to receive, knower, not because it is harsh, but because it asks something significant of you. It asks you to stop looking outward for the source of your difficulties and to begin looking inward. Not with blame, not with the kind of merciless self-examination that compounds suffering, but with genuine, courageous curiosity. The truth is this: the world around you is a mirror, and everything in it, every person who has wounded you, every situation that has drained you, every pattern that has repeated itself across different chapters of your life, is showing you something that lives inside you, something that is asking, through the reflection, to be seen. This is the ancient Hermetic principle of correspondence in its most personal application. As within, so without. Not as a poetic metaphor, but as a living law. The frequency you carry inside you, the beliefs you hold about your own worth, the expectations you have about how life treats you, the unhealed wounds that quietly shape every decision you make. These things are not invisible to the world. They are broadcast continuously and precisely into every interaction and every experience, and the world, responding to that broadcast, sends back experiences that match it. This is why the same wound keeps arriving in different costumes. The person who grew up feeling unheard will find in adulthood that their voice keeps being dismissed by employers, by partners, by friends who consistently redirect the conversation back to themselves. Not because the world is conspiring against them, but because there is a frequency inside them, laid down in early experience, that expects not to be heard. That frequency is like a signal, and the world responds to it as faithfully as a tuning fork responds to a matching vibration. The mirror does not lie. But it is easy to misread. Because when we look at a mirror and see something painful, the instinctive response is not to look more closely at the mirror. It is to look away from it, or to blame the glass. We blame the other person. We blame the circumstances. We blame the economy, the timing, the generation we were born into, the family we came from. And all of those things may have genuinely contributed to our experience. The pain is real. The injustice in many cases is real. None of that is being minimized here. But the mirror is still the mirror. And the question the mirror is always asking, beneath every grievance, beneath every loss, beneath every situation that triggers the familiar ache of an old wound, is, what in you is this reflecting? What unresolved truth in your inner world is this outer experience trying to bring to light? This is not a comfortable question. It was never meant to be. The mirror has never been placed in your life to confirm how fine everything already is. It has been placed there to show you what still needs your attention, what is still calling for healing, what you have been carrying so long that it has become invisible, until the mirror, with its relentless and impersonal honesty, makes it visible again. The most transformative thing you can do in the face of any painful experience is to pause before you react, before you explain it away, before you assign blame, before you begin constructing the narrative of what happened and who is responsible, and ask, what is this showing me? Not what did they do, or what did fate do, or what did the universe do, but what is this showing me about what is alive in me? That pause is where freedom begins. That question is where the mirror stops being a source of suffering and becomes instead what it was always meant to be, a portal. The pattern that keeps finding you. You have noticed it. You may not have named it, but you have noticed it. The way a particular kind of person keeps entering your life, wearing different faces, speaking with different voices, arriving through different doors, but always eventually creating the same feeling in you, the same specific ache, the same recognizable moment of disappointment or abandonment or betrayal or invisibility that you have experienced so many times now that some part of you has almost come to expect it. Or perhaps it shows up not through people, but through circumstances. The opportunity that always seems to dissolve at the last moment. The project that begins with such promise and ends in the same frustrating incompletion. The season of progress that is invariably followed by a season of collapse. Different details, same emotional signature. Different chapters, same unresolved theme. This is not bad luck, and it is not a curse. It is the universe's most patient and persistent form of communication, the repeating pattern. And a repeating pattern has only one meaning. It means the lesson inside it has not yet been fully received. The soul, in its journey through a human life, carries with it a set of unresolved energies. Wounds from early experience that were never fully processed. Beliefs about the self and the world that were formed in moments of pain, and have been operating as invisible instructions ever since. Decisions made in response to fear or loss that calcified, over time, into default modes of being, ways of relating, ways of protecting, ways of moving through the world that once served a purpose but have long since become limitations. These unresolved energies do not disappear simply because life moves forward. They travel with the soul. They insert themselves into new relationships and new situations with remarkable efficiency. And they will continue to do so, creating variations of the same experience, the same pain, the same dead end, until the soul turns toward them with enough presence and enough courage to finally ask, "What are you here to teach me?" The law of rhythm, one of the 7 hermetic principles that ancient wisdom has preserved across thousands of years, teaches that everything in the universe moves in cycles, that what goes in one direction must eventually swing in the other. But the soul that has not learned its lesson does not experience this rhythm as freedom. It experiences it as a loop, a relentless, circular return to the same point, the same pain, the same question it has been too afraid, or too unaware, to answer. The answer is never found in the external pattern. It is never found in the other person, in the situation, in the circumstance. The answer is always found in the one constant that is present in every repetition of the pattern, you. Not because you are to blame. Let that be absolutely clear. Blame is not the point and never has been. The point is awareness. The point is the recognition that the pattern is not happening to you from outside. It is being generated in part from inside, from a frequency you are carrying, from a story you are telling, from a wound that has been waiting, with remarkable patience, for you to finally turn toward it. When you do, when you stop for the first time, not to survive the pattern but to understand it, something shifts. Not immediately in the outer circumstances, but in the frequency you are broadcasting. And when the frequency shifts, the pattern loses its power, because the pattern was never really about the other people or the other situations. It was about what you were carrying that kept calling them toward you. The universe will stop sending the pattern the moment the pattern is no longer needed. And it is no longer needed the moment the soul has truly received what it was always trying to deliver. Pain as precision. There is a thought that the mind resists with everything it has, and it resists it precisely because if it were true, everything the mind has built around the experience of suffering would need to be rebuilt. The thought is this: your pain was not random, not the loss that arrived without warning, not the illness that changed the trajectory of your life, not the ending that left you standing in the wreckage of something you had built with tremendous care and love, not the betrayal that cost you your faith in people, or in yourself, or in the very idea that life is fair. None of it was random. None of it was punishment. None of it was the universe failing you. abandoning you, or simply generating chaos with no regard for what it does to a human soul. Every experience of significant pain in a human life is a precisely calibrated delivery, a transmission, something that could not have arrived any other way, and that contains within it, beneath the grief, beneath the shock, beneath the exhaustion of having survived it, an intelligence so specific, so personally tailored to the exact contours of the receiving soul, that the only accurate word for it is design. The concept of soul contracts, preserved in the mystical traditions of multiple cultures, referenced across the near-death experience accounts of thousands of people who have touched the other side and returned with an understanding of purpose that the living world rarely offers, holds that the soul, before incarnating into a human life, participates in the shaping of its own experience, not as a passive recipient of what will happen, but as a conscious architect of the experiences it will need in order to grow, to heal, to complete what was left unfinished in other seasons of its existence. This does not mean that the soul chooses suffering for its own sake. It means that the soul, with a wisdom that far exceeds the conscious mind's understanding, recognizes which experiences will create the conditions for its deepest transformation. And it chooses them, not lightly, not carelessly, with the kind of profound and long-sighted love that only becomes visible from the perspective of the full arc. Not the single painful moment of the experience itself, but the entire trajectory of who the soul becomes because of it. You cannot see the full arc from inside the most painful chapter. That is not a failure of perception. That is the nature of being human. The human experience is lived in the present moment, with all its weight and confusion and grief. The soul's perspective, the one that can see the design, is not usually accessible to the thinking mind in the middle of a crisis. But this is precisely why the signs matter. This is precisely why the universe speaks. Because it is trying to give you, in the most painful moments, a glimpse of the perspective you cannot fully access yet. A sense, not a certainty, but a sense, that this is not meaningless. That this is not you being arbitrarily broken. That something in you is being made more true, more free, more fully itself, through an experience that only felt like destruction. The most ancient spiritual traditions have always taught that the deepest transformations do not happen in comfort. They happen in the fire. Not because suffering is noble, not because pain is something to be sought or celebrated, but because the fire is the only thing that burns away what is not essential, the only thing that reduces the self to its true core, the part that cannot be taken, cannot be broken, cannot be separated from its own deepest nature, no matter what the outer circumstances deliver. What has burned you is not your enemy. What has burned you is the universe's most precise instrument. And what remains, when the burning is done, is the truest version of you that has ever existed. The signs hidden in plain sight. The universe does not communicate only through crisis. Crisis is the volume turned all the way up, reserved for the moments when everything else has failed to break through. But in the ordinary texture of a human day, the communication is constant, quiet, woven so seamlessly into the fabric of experience that it is easy, almost inevitable, to walk right past it. There are numbers that appear at exact moments of decision or doubt. The same sequence on a clock, a license plate, the page of a book opened at random, carrying a resonance that the rational mind dismisses and the soul recognizes immediately. The study of angel numbers, rooted in the ancient discipline of numerology and carried forward through the mystical traditions of multiple cultures, holds that these numerical patterns are not coincidences. They are coordinates. They are the universe's way of saying, I am here. You are on the right track. Pay attention. There are dreams that arrive during the most significant transitions of a life, vivid, specific, emotionally charged dreams that carry the unmistakable quality of being received rather than generated. Dreams that speak in symbols, in images, in the precise emotional language of the soul's deeper knowing. The ancient world took dreams with absolute seriousness. Entire temples were dedicated to the practice of incubation, the deliberate seeking of divine guidance through the dream state. The modern world has largely abandoned this reverence. But the dreams have not stopped arriving. There are moments of inexplicable stillness in the middle of ordinary days. A pause at a window, a moment in traffic, a quiet second between tasks, when something arrives that can only be described as knowing. Not a thought, not an emotion. Something quieter than both. A certainty without object that arrives and passes so quickly that most people never register it at all. There are strangers who appear in the most unexpected moments and say the exact thing you needed to hear, not because they could have known what you needed, not because any normal explanation could account for their precise timing, but because they were placed there. Because the universe, in its endless ingenuity, uses every available instrument to deliver its messages, and human beings, carrying their own frequencies, their own patterns of resonance and recognition, are among its most powerful instruments. There are songs that find you, not the other way around, that come through a speaker in a public place or through a radio station you never listened to, or through a playlist that was never meant to include them, and they contain, in their lyrics or their melody, or simply in the feeling they produce in your chest, exactly the message that is most alive in you at that moment. This is not sentiment. This is synchronicity. This is the universe using the language of beauty and emotion to reach parts of you that logic cannot access. The signs have never been absent from your life. They have always been there, embedded in the ordinary, waiting to be read. What changes is not the frequency of their appearance. What changes is your willingness to take them seriously. Your willingness to say, "This is not a coincidence. This is not my imagination running toward comfort. This is real, and it is personal, and it is addressed to me." That willingness, that single shift in orientation, transforms the way a human life is experienced, not because the world becomes magical and effortless, but because you are no longer moving through it alone, because you begin to feel, in a way that builds and deepens over time, the presence of an intelligence that is always attending to you, always adjusting, always finding new ways to communicate. Across every barrier the rational mind erects, the one message it has been trying to deliver since the beginning: you are not alone. You have never been alone. And the signs, the ones you have been walking past for years and have always been the proof of that. The danger of spiritual deafness. There is a cost to not listening. It is not always immediate, and it is not always dramatic, but it is real. And it accumulates over time with a precision that mirrors exactly the precision of the signs that were ignored. Spiritual deafness is not a character flaw. It is not stupidity or weakness or a failure of faith. It is the natural consequence of living in a world that trains human beings from their earliest years to privilege the external over the internal, the measurable over the intuitive, the visible over the felt. A world that treats inner knowing as suspect and outer evidence as the only legitimate form of truth. In that world, the quiet frequency of the universe's communication is easy to dismiss, not because it is genuinely unconvincing, but because every structure around you is built to suggest that it does not count. But dismissing it has a cost, and the cost begins subtly. It begins as a vague sense of disconnection. The feeling that you are moving through your life efficiently, responsibly, doing all the things you are supposed to do, and yet something essential is missing. Something that you cannot name precisely but whose absence you feel in the quiet moments. The moments between tasks, before sleep. In the middle of conversations that suddenly seem to lack weight. A persistent, low-grade sense that you are not quite living your actual life. This feeling, when it is met with the same dismissal that was applied to the original signs, begins to deepen. It moves from vague to specific, from background noise to a presence you have to actively work to avoid. And the work of avoidance is exhausting, far more exhausting than most people realize because it operates below the level of conscious awareness. The body tenses around what the mind refuses to acknowledge. The energy that could be moving freely toward genuine expression gets spent instead on maintaining the distance between the self and its own deeper truth. Over time, the cost becomes visible in the patterns already explored in this video. The recurring relationships, the repeated dead ends, the cycle of building and losing and rebuilding that never seems to produce the stability it promises. But it also becomes visible in something less dramatic and more pervasive, a kind of spiritual fatigue. a wearing thin of the soul's capacity to remain genuinely engaged with its own life. A quality of going through the motions that slowly, quietly, replaces the experience of actually living. The human soul was not designed for this. It was not designed to be a passenger in its own existence, carried along by habit and expectation and the accumulated weight of unexamined choices. It was designed to be in conversation, with itself, with others, and with the larger intelligence that holds it. It was designed to receive guidance and to act on it, to trust the frequency beneath thought, to read the signs and move accordingly. When that conversation is consistently refused, the soul does not disappear. It does not stop trying to reach you, but it does grow quieter, in the way that anything grows quieter when it is repeatedly told that it does not exist. And a quiet soul, a soul that has learned to keep its most essential communications to itself, is a soul living in a kind of internal exile that no external achievement, no accumulation of comfort or status or security, will ever truly resolve. This is not a warning designed to frighten you. It is a description, offered with complete honesty, of a condition that is far more common than most people will ever admit. And it is offered here because you may have recognized something of yourself in it, because the recognition itself is a sign, because the fact that you felt something shift in you when those words landed is the universe, speaking again, saying, "This is exactly what has been happening. And now that you can see it, something can change." Surrender as the most radical act. The word surrender has been assigned, in the language of most modern cultures, a meaning that is almost exclusively negative. To surrender is to give up, to admit defeat, to lay down the will and accept a lesser outcome than the one you were fighting for. It is the thing you do when you have run out of options, when the battle is lost, when strength has finally failed. This understanding of surrender is not only incomplete, it is the precise inversion of the truth. Surrender, in the spiritual tradition that spans the full breadth of human wisdom, from the Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece, who taught the discipline of distinguishing what is and what is not within our power, to the Eastern traditions of non-attachment that reveal the liberation available in releasing the grip of personal will, to the mystical lineages of every major religion that speak, in their deepest teachings, of alignment with divine will as the highest human act. Surrender is not the end of agency. It is the beginning of it. What the uninitiated mind experiences as surrender, that moment of releasing the desperate grip on a particular outcome, of ceasing to force a direction that is not opening, of finally saying, with a quietness that comes from exhaustion and arrives as grace, "I cannot control this, and I am no longer going to pretend that I can," is not a moment of weakness. It is a moment of extraordinary clarity. Because in that moment, something that has been consuming enormous amounts of energy, the effort of maintaining the illusion of control, is finally released. And in the space that the illusion occupied, something else becomes possible. The perception of what is actually happening, rather than what the fear mind insists must be made to happen. The awareness of what the universe is actually making available, rather than what the ego has decided it is owed. The recognition that the path forward may not look like the path that was being forced, and that it may in fact lead somewhere far more aligned with what the soul actually needs. Marcus Aurelius, writing in the personal journal he never intended for others to read, returned again and again to this theme. The Stoic practice he describes is not passivity. It is discernment. It is the careful daily practice of identifying what lies within the sphere of one's will and releasing, without resentment, everything that does not. He understood, as every genuine spiritual tradition has understood, that the attempt to control what cannot be controlled is not strength. It is a form of suffering that the sufferer inflicts upon themselves, and the release of that attempt is not defeat. It is freedom. The law of attraction, as it is most commonly presented, is often misunderstood as a technology for forcing the universe to deliver specific desires. But in its deeper application, in the understanding of energetic alignment that underlies it, what it actually describes is the power of surrender. not the surrender of desire itself, but the surrender of the attachment to a particular form of its fulfillment. The shift from demanding a specific outcome to becoming genuinely open to the highest outcome available. And that shift, that movement from grasping to receiving, is where the real power of the law of attraction operates. The universe cannot pour into a fist. It can only pour into an open hand. Surrender is not giving up on what you want. It is trusting that the intelligence of the universe has a clearer view of how to get you there than your fear-driven, control-seeking mind does. It is the willingness to release your own map and trust the navigation of something that can see the entire territory. It is the most radical act available to a human soul, not because it is difficult, though it is, but because it requires the one thing the ego is most unwilling to offer: the acknowledgement that it does not know everything, that there is a wisdom larger than itself at work, and that aligning with that wisdom, rather than resisting it, is the path to the life it has been trying, through all its forcing and struggling and controlling, to create. The intelligence behind the chaos. Nothing in the universe is random. This is not a comforting idea offered to make difficult experiences more bearable. It is a principle, ancient, consistent, confirmed across disciplines and traditions so different from one another that their agreement on this single point carries a weight that cannot be dismissed. The ancient Hermetic principle of cause and effect, described in the foundational texts of Western mysticism as an absolute and inviolable law operating at every level of existence, states that nothing happens by chance, that every effect has a cause and every cause produces an effect, and that this chain of causation is not mechanical and impersonal, but intelligent and purposeful, that the universe does not generate events randomly and then stand back to observe what they produce. It generates events as a continuous, coherent, responsive communication with the beings who inhabit it. Carl Jung's concept of synchronicity extends this principle into the territory of personal experience. He observed across decades of clinical practice and personal study that the events of a human life do not arrange themselves in purely causal sequences. They arrange themselves in patterns of meaning, patterns that connect inner states with outer circumstances in ways that no mechanical model of causation can explain, but that carry an unmistakable coherence, a narrative logic, a quality of purposeful design that becomes more legible the more seriously it is taken. Modern physics, arriving from an entirely different direction, has reached conclusions that rhyme with these ancient insights in ways that would have seemed impossible 2 centuries ago. The quantum entanglement of particles across arbitrary distances, the role of the observer in shaping the behavior of observed phenomena, the increasing evidence that what we experience as separate objects and events in a material world are, at the most fundamental level, expressions of a single, interconnected field of energy, a field that responds, with measurable sensitivity, to the frequencies introduced into it. What all of this is pointing toward, from the most ancient mystical intuition to the most current edge of scientific inquiry, is the same thing: that the world is not a collection of separate random occurrences happening to isolated separate beings. It is a living system, an intelligent, responsive, deeply interconnected whole, and every human being, at every moment, is in active relationship with that whole, broadcasting a frequency, receiving a response, participating in a conversation so vast and so precise that the thinking mind can barely begin to comprehend its scope. This is why the chaos is not actually chaos, not at the level where it matters. What appears as chaos on the surface of experience and the sudden ending, the unexpected loss, the collapse of something that seemed stable, is, at the level of the intelligence operating beneath it, a purposeful reorganization, the system adjusting itself, the larger pattern correcting the smaller one. The intelligence that holds the full arc of a life making a move that the person living inside that single moment cannot yet understand, but that will, in time, sometimes in days, sometimes in years, reveal itself as exactly what was needed. This does not make the chaos comfortable. It does not make the grief less real, or the disorientation less disorienting. But it does change what you do with it. When you know that chaos is intelligence in a form you cannot yet read, you stop fighting it long enough to look at it. You stop trying to force it back into the shape of your plan and begin, instead, to ask, what is this reorganizing toward? What is this creating space for? What is the design I cannot yet see that this disruption is in service of? And in the asking, in that simple, courageous shift from resistance to inquiry, the chaos begins to speak. Not in full sentences, not with the clarity of hindsight, but with the quiet and unmistakable quality of something alive, something intelligent, something that has been, all along, working not against you, but toward you. What the universe has been trying to tell you. This section is different from the ones that came before it, not because the ideas are different. They are the same ideas, moving now to their deepest application. But because what is needed here is not more analysis or more framework. What is needed here is directness, a willingness to speak, without distance, to what you have actually been carrying. You have been carrying the fear that you are somehow behind, that everyone else seems to have figured something out that you have not, that the life you imagined for yourself, the version that felt possible and even inevitable at some earlier point, has moved further away instead of closer, and that the distance between where you are and where you thought you would be by now is a measure of something you lack. The universe has been trying to tell you that this fear is built on a false premise. There is no behind. There is no schedule you have failed to keep. There is no version of your life that was supposed to have happened by now and didn't, leaving you in deficit. The only schedule that exists for your life is the one being written by the intelligence that holds your full arc, and that intelligence has never, not once, been running late. You have been carrying the belief that if you just controlled enough variables, if you made the right decisions, avoided the right mistakes, worked hard enough, planned carefully enough, you could prevent the pain. That the suffering you have experienced was, in some fundamental way, a failure of management, a price paid for insufficient vigilance. The universe has been trying to tell you that control was never the answer. Not because you are powerless, no, you're not powerless, but because the energy spent maintaining the illusion of total control is energy that could have been spent in genuine relationship with your own life, in presence, in trust, in the kind of open, attentive engagement with what is actually happening that makes it possible to hear, clearly and without distortion, what the moment is actually asking of you. You have been carrying the grief of loss, not only the specific losses you can name, but the larger, quieter grief of a life that has felt, at times, like it was happening to you, rather than through you. The grief of feeling that something essential has been missing, not from your circumstances, but from your experience of being alive. The grief of a connection with yourself, with others, with something larger, that you once sensed was possible and have not always been able to find. The universe has been trying to tell you that this grief is not evidence of absence. It is evidence of a soul that knows what it is capable of. A soul that has not stopped wanting what it came here for. A soul whose longing for genuine connection, genuine purpose, genuine alignment is not a flaw or a fantasy. It is the most real thing about you. And it has been preserved, intact, through everything you have been through. And you have been carrying, beneath all of it, beneath the fear and the control and the grief, a question so fundamental and so persistent that you have rarely allowed yourself to ask it directly, because the asking of it felt too vulnerable, too exposed. The question is, does any of this mean anything? Am I being held by something? Is there an intelligence that knows me, not humanity in general, but me? And is it paying attention? The universe has been trying to tell you, through every sign, every pattern, every disruption, every coincidence too precise to be accidental. Yes. Yes, it means something. Yes, you are held. Yes, there is an intelligence that knows you with a specificity and a completeness that no human relationship will ever fully replicate. And it has been paying attention to you every moment of your life, not as a distant observer, as a presence, as the very ground beneath the experience of being you. This is what the signs were always pointing toward. Not information about the future, not instructions for specific decisions, not a cosmic GPS routing you to a predetermined destination. But this knowledge, this remembering, the return, through whatever it took to bring you here, to the awareness of what has always been true. You are not alone. You were never alone. And everything that has ever felt like abandonment was, at its deepest level, the universe insisting, with everything at its disposal, that you find your way back to that truth. The soul that finally listened. There is a before and an after. You may not be able to feel the exact line between them yet. The shift is often quiet, more like the turning of a tide than the breaking of a wave. But it is there. Something has changed in the way you are sitting with your own life. Something has moved in the way you are holding what you have been through. And that movement, subtle as it may feel right now, is not nothing. It is everything. The soul that has learned to listen to the universe does not suddenly find itself free of difficulty. Pain does not cease to exist because perception has shifted. Loss does not become painless because it is understood as purposeful. The human experience retains its full weight, its full complexity, its full capacity for grief and confusion, and the kind of disorientation that arrives when what you built falls down, and what will be built next has not yet shown its form. But something is different. The quality of the suffering changes, because the soul that is listening, truly listening, not as a practice of spiritual performance but as a genuine, lived orientation toward the intelligence that speaks through experience, is never lost in the same way again. It may be confused, it may be grieving, it may be standing in the wreckage of something it loved and unable, in that moment, to see what is being created in the space the wreckage has left behind. But it is not cut off, not from itself, not from the larger intelligence it has come to trust, not from the conversation that has been running, unbroken, from the very beginning of its existence. And the difference between suffering in that connection and suffering without it is the difference between a storm you weather inside a structure that holds you and a storm you face in the open. The storm is the same. What changes is whether you face it alone. You are not meant to face any of it alone. Not the losses, not the uncertainties, not the long seasons of waiting between the ending of one chapter and the beginning of the next. The universe that designed your experience also designed into it the means of navigating it. The signs, the synchronicities, the patterns, the precise and personal messages embedded in the texture of an ordinary life. Everything you needed to find your way has always been available to you. The only thing that was ever missing was the willingness to recognize it as what it was. And now you have that willingness. Not perfectly, not completely, not without the fear that old habits and old skepticisms will reassert themselves in moments of difficulty. But the door that was closed is now open. And a door that has been opened even by a fraction lets in more light than a room that has never been opened at all. You came to this video, whether you know it or not, because some part of you was ready. Ready not just to survive what you have been through, but to understand it. Ready not just to cope with the uncertainty of what comes next, but to meet it with a quality of presence and trust that changes the nature of the meeting. Ready, at some level below the thinking mind, to stop running from the signs and to begin receiving them. That readiness is not something you manufactured. It is something that was prepared in you, by everything you have been through, by every experience that brought you to your knees or stopped you in your tracks or forced you into a stillness you did not choose. The universe has been preparing you for this moment, not for the watching of a video, for the opening that the video represents, the willingness to hear, the capacity to receive, the quiet but unshakable recognition that you were always, in the deepest sense, in conversation with something that loves you. Go forward from here differently, not with the pressure of having to get everything right, not with the burden of constant vigilance for signs, not with the spiritual perfectionism that turns awareness into another form of anxiety. Simply go forward listening, with a little more trust in what you feel before you think, with a little more willingness to ask, in the face of whatever comes, what this is trying to show you, rather than immediately moving to resist or explain it away. The universe will meet that willingness. It has been waiting for it. It has been patient with you through every season in which it was not yet available. patient with a steadiness that has nothing to do with time, and everything to do with the absolute certainty that this moment, this opening, this willingness, was always coming. You were always going to arrive here, through whatever it took. Through all of it, the losses, the lessons, the long stretches of not understanding, the moments of beauty and grace woven through the difficulty like light through broken things. You were always going to arrive here, and now you have. The universe has been shouting at you, and at last, you have heard it. That is not the end of the story. It is the moment the real one begins.